going to do this. We're having some technical difficulties.
Yep.
Those attendees, I'm sorry, go ahead, Scott.
Just said you need
Lori,
to take back control.
Oh, that might be why, but Lori, the bottom of my screen says this session is being recorded.
Yeah, I turned the recording on. Let me change presenter back to me. That's a good idea, Scott. For those of you who are on the line, I apologize. We're having a bit of technical difficulty. We'll begin in just a moment. Amaya, can you call GoToWebinar and ask them, what the deal is, and see if they can help us? They may just tell us to close out and start the webinar over, which would be a shame. For those of you who are on the line who are muted, I apologize. We're having technical difficulties getting started here. I'm not even sure if you can hear me.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay. I believe the broadcast is now started. I apologize, we're getting started a little bit late. We had some technical difficulties. My name is Lori Rawlings. I'm the Executive Director of PMC and SMACCA. And we're pleased to bring you this webinar today on succession planning or exit planning. Our host today is Scott Bushkie. He is the president of Cornerstone Business Services, and they are a company here in Appleton area that works with clients all around the Midwest on helping them prepare and execute an exit strategy or succession planning strategy for business owners who are looking to get their business valued and then sold or to otherwise transition out of the business. So thank you for joining us here today, Scott. I'm going to turn over the controls to you, and please go ahead and enlighten us.
All right, thanks, Lori. Appreciate that. Again, Scott Bushkie from Cornerstone, and excited to talk with you guys today and just get into an area that I've been working in for 19 years, which is, helping entrepreneurs and business owners, family-owned businesses, exit their businesses or transition their businesses from either one generation to the next or to a third party or whatever it may be, which we'll get into some of those details soon. So the agenda for today is, what is succession planning or exit planning, some of the common mistakes that we see a lot of people make that hopefully you don't have to make those same mistakes, the process of exit planning, and then some action items or next steps that you can take to start that process. So a little bit more about Cornerstone, just real brief. So as Lori said, we're a mergers and acquisition firm. We're helping people either grow through acquisition on the buy side or confidentially selling their business and maximizing value on the sell side. The estimates of value and the business and market analysis, which help understand where you're at today and how you can get to that next level and what some of the low-hanging fruit is that we see out there and how you benchmark your financials against your other peers within your industry and other things along that line, industry reports. We're headquartered here in Wisconsin, up in Green Bay, and have offices in Iowa and California as well. Some of the different industries that we're in are here, at a big high level, manufacturing, distribution, service, which obviously a lot of falls underneath that. Here are some of the more recent industries that we worked in. Don't do a lot of bars, restaurants, or single location retail and things along that line. Most of the companies that we work with, just to give you some context as I go through this presentation, are in that $2 to $100 million range, or EBITDA or cash flow of $500,000 to $10 million. We work all over the country and do some international work from time to time. And we're a team of 15 advisors and support staff between the buy side and sell side and valuation. And we started back in 2001. So that's the extent of the commercial and what we do, just to give you some context. And again, what we want to get into is this important item of succession planning or exit planning. So let's just get into what exactly that is to start. So what is succession planning? The process for identifying and developing new leaders who can replace old leaders when they leave, retire, or die. So a lot of that is tied to bringing people in, or call it replacement planning. It's one component of exit planning, which you'll see next is a much bigger, more comprehensive piece. But this is someone that you're looking at. Okay, internally, is this a key management person? Is this someone in the family, who is going to take over for me when I eventually want to get out of this business, or I'm asked to get out of the business one way or the other. So the one thing that I can tell everyone on this call is that you will transition out of your business some way, somehow, even though I think a lot of my entrepreneur clients think that they'll, are going to work and live forever. That's just unfortunately not the case. So this is a way to help make that transition that much more smoother and more proactive versus reactive. What is exit planning? Again, this is more, like I said, more comprehensive. It's the preparation for the exit of an entrepreneur from his company to maximize the enterprise value of the company in mergers and acquisition transactions, and thus is shareholder value, although other non-financial objectives may be pursued, including the transition of the company to next generation, sale to employees or management, or other altruistic non-financial objectives. So, what does all that stuff mean from Wikipedia? It means basically the business owners define their objectives with respect to their eventual exit, and then they execute the plan. And that's really what we're going to talk about here today. And I think a lot of people, as you'll see, don't do this because I think it's big and it's the unknown and it's something that's just going to happen someday, and I don't need to plan for it, or I'll plan for it tomorrow. And that's just not the case. We've seen both in internal transitions and also external sales that the people who put together plans and execute plans and have an idea of what they're going after have a much better chance of success moving forward. So again, the great Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind, and let's see how great entrepreneurs are at doing that. You can see this was an independent study done a few years back. And so if you're not doing this, you're in the majority. Only 10% of this, and this was a large national study, of owners have a written succession plan. 10% out of that actually have written it down. Other people know about it. So if something were to happen to them, the plan would go into place, and they've been working on their plan. 38% of the group, have some kind of informal plan, but it's not written down. So they've talked about it, they've discussed it, or they maybe haven't even discussed it. They know what it would be, but if they were to become deceased or pass on, no one would know that plan, and the chances of that plan transitioning are not great. And then 52% have no plan at all. And again, I find this interesting because if you look at this and say, okay, most business owners, I think 80% of business owners, their business, your business, is the largest asset that you have, but yet most of us don't know, how, when, or why we're ever going to get out of our business. And it doesn't make a lot of sense when you step back and look at it, but all of us as entrepreneurs are most times concerned with just putting out the day-to-day fires, or just dealing with the day-to-day activities and trying to grow the business and retain good people, which is in all those different things that are the challenges of the day. And we don't really step back and think about, what are we doing this for anyways, and what do we want out of our business at the end of the day. So this is something that's going to help you take kind of peel that onion back a little bit and look at the bigger picture. Here's another study done, and this is pretty sad that up to 1/3 of businesses that are shut down, closed, liquidated, whatever word you want to use, were actually very successful at their termination, but they just didn't have this next piece in place. They didn't know how to do it, and they said, well, I'm just going to shut it down and go out of business. And maybe they had enough money to live the rest of their life, but their legacy now is gone. The employees that have worked for them, are now out on the street looking for another job, and it's just, it's a sad stat that's out there. And then you look at, okay, well, this isn't going to happen to me, but the 5 Ds, 50% of people are going to transition out of their business because of one of the 5 Ds, which is death, divorce, disability, distress within the company, or a disagreement with a partner or key employee or management team. 50%, is going to be more of a reactive mode, something that they can't control, versus the other 50% it's more of a proactive mode. So again, this is more prevalent than you can think of, something happening to you, and if you don't have a plan in place, it really could hurt not only your business and your employees, but also your family and what they would, the value that you or they would get out of the business after the fact. So what are some common mistakes? I want to jump into, what we've seen over, again, my 19 years of what people do right and what they don't do right, and help you learn through some other people's mistakes is best that we possibly can here today in our short time. So the first mistake is people are, typically wait too long, and when that happens, they typically get burnt out. And what we've seen is, if you look at this little chart that I just pulled up, people get into this in their businesses, what I've seen, and they've got a lot of energy, they're excited, they got a lot of growth opportunities, and they take advantage of a lot of things, and they continue to grow, and all of a sudden it becomes more of a lifestyle business. They don't have any plan of getting out anytime soon. And if you're kind of running, it's almost like you're running a marathon or on a treadmill, and you're just doing the day-to-day things. And if you wait too long for getting out of the business at that optimal time, most times you get burnt out. In fact, we produce through the International Business Broker Association and M&A Source in Pepperdine University, we put together a quarterly survey that's a national survey that's been going on for 4 years. And the number one reason for getting out is retirement, which makes sense with all the baby boomers and the age group that's at the retirement stage. But the second most common reason, unfortunately, is burnt out. So what you see is that when you don't know where that finish line is, you get tired, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, I just can't take this anymore. I want to sell. Or you can put together a plan, execute that plan, understand where that finish line is, which we'll talk a little bit more about today, and actually have an upward swing. And I can tell you from a sales standpoint that buyers don't care what you did 5, 10, 20 years ago when you were really getting after it and in your prime. They care about really the last 3, maybe 5 years, and quite frankly, they're going to put the most weight, if not all their weight, on the last 12 months. So so you could be, we had a client that was in business for 80 years, profitable for 79 of them, but it was a second generation looking to pass on to the third generation, but they never paid the third generation enough money to come in and take over the business. And they also they couldn't give up control. So we had the 87-year-old uncle running the business like he did, 20, 30 years ago, and just making some really bad business decisions. And the bank came in and said, hey, look, you've got to either work with Cornerstone or we're going to take the company back and work with Cornerstone. So we ended up selling the business, for about $4 million when they could have probably got $8 to $10 million just a few years before that, because the business was profitable and doing well, and all of a sudden it was on a downward trend. So, when you look at this burnt out, it can be a big difference between what you get for your value or what you don't get, or not selling at all. Because again, the more risk, the more concern, the more downside that there is, the less value you're going to get for your business, or the more it's going to be on an earn-out type arrangement or things along that line. So, you want to have it either be steady or have an upward trend when you're selling your business, not a downward trend ideally, and not a yo-yo where you're up 1 year, down the next, and some big swings, because again, that brings instability, which lessens the value of the company. Another example that we've had of waiting too long was a gentleman who owned a logistics and warehouse business, probably was worth around $20 million. Just a really good guy, actually, here in Wisconsin. And went and met with him through his financial advisor, introduced us to him, and talked with them and said, yeah, I think we get around $20 million for your business. He's like, oh, that's more than I could ever spend. But I just want 1 more year. Just give me 1 more year to pay down a little bit more debt, to do this other, program that I wanted to install, or whatever it might be. And he did 1 more year to us, 3 or 4 years in a row, and all of a sudden, tragically passed away of a heart attack. And he never got to see the life, what his business did for him, and also his wife now took over the business, and she was not part of the business at all, and the business drastically went down. So the wife and the family had to deal with not only losing a loved one, but also trying to pick up the pieces from a business that they didn't know much about, and it was just a real hardship for their family. So on the flip side of that, a positive story that we've seen is we had a business owner that did a business and market analysis with us, understood that the business was worth about $3 million. This was down in Beloit, and also identified some low-hanging fruit and some areas of risk that a buyer would see, kind of looking at it from a buyer's perspective, and said, hey, here are 2 or 3 items that you could work on to build up your business. He continued to grow his, work his business and work in those couple areas, not on 40 of them, only 2 or 3. And 2 years later, he sold his business for $5.5 million. So, he knew he wanted to get out. He worked a plan because the $3 million didn't meet what his lifestyle goals were. And just 2 short years later, was able to get almost double for his business because he just worked through this plan that we're going to be talking about. So another common mistake is not knowing the business worth. And again, this is something that you probably know pretty close what your house is worth, your vehicles, but again, your largest asset, most people don't know. And if you think you do know, in most cases, it's most business owners, not all, but most, believe it's higher. The value is higher than what the market would really bear. And at the end of the day, no matter what, I think, the owner thinks, the valuation person thinks, the market always wins. They're going to pay what they're going to pay at the end of the day if you're looking outside And internally too, they have to be able to finance it and make the cash flows work and things along that line. So, I've got up here the proud parent syndrome, and I think this is how many people value the business. Is it's almost like giving up, one of your children for adoption. And again, everybody's kids, the smartest kid in school, the best looking and the best athlete, and they price it accordingly. And it's just one of those things that it's easy to see, with the emotional side of things and all the blood, sweat, and tears that people have put into their business of why they think it's worth a certain number. But typically, this is, again, the number one reasons why businesses don't sell out in the third party is because of the valuation. So understanding where your valuation is, and then knowing, again, which we'll get into, of what you need to get out of your business. Owners don't have a team of specialists around them, and this is something that is near and dear to me, because we just went through a transaction that closed in Michigan last week, and they had locations in Michigan, California, and over in China. And it was one of those things that he hired an attorney that was one of his buddies. He was the partner, and they had some supposedly M&A guy or merger and acquisition attorney on their staff. And we got into the deal, and at the end of the day, he was time kills all deals, and he was blowing through deadlines. He'd tell us he'd have something on a Tuesday. We wouldn't get it to the following Friday or Monday. And he was really, basically, we were paying for his education, because if you work with a good attorney or accountant, they're going to know what's the customary rules. They're going to know what is normal in course of business, and they're going to, argue for your side, but also know what battles to pick and what not to pick. And this attorney just didn't know what battles to pick. In fact, he sent back his red line of the purchase agreement, and the other attorney said, we can't even redline this. It was that bad, and we had to spend probably another week just going through legal issues on phone call after phone call after phone call. And then the next round had, which usually doesn't have that many changes, had 986 changes to the 60-page document, which is just incredible. Long story short, we were able to get the deal closed. It almost did blow up because of the attorney. And instead of a bill probably of around 40, 50 grand, which I estimated, it was actually $100,000, just because he had to put so much time into working the deal and everything else. So this was about a $25 million deal. So not all attorneys cost that much for a deal. It depends on the size and the complexity and everything else with multiple locations. But you want to make sure that you're not paying for one of your advisors to get educated. This is a time where, my last point here, the family doctor, general doctor versus the brain surgeon. Kind of picture this is, if you've got your spouse or one of your loved ones, it's a life or death situation, and they need brain surgery. You're not going to go to your buddy who's been your family doctor for 30 years and say, hey, I know there's specialists out there, but I trust you enough. You're my buddy. I don't want to hurt your feelings. Good luck and take care of my child or my wife or her husband. This is something, and this is the same thing. Many of you have worked, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 more years in your business, and you work with us or someone like us to find a buyer on the outside, and you go through all that work. The last thing you need is to bring in the wrong attorney who thinks he or she wants to be the smartest person in the room, or isn't going to play by customary rules, or do whatever they're going to do to blow this deal up. And we've seen that happen, unfortunately, several times over the last 2 decades. And a lot of it goes back to when you do end up using your own attorney or accountant. And again, it's not that sometimes you can't use them. Sometimes they are an M&A specialist, and then it's all the better. But otherwise, partner your attorney and your CPA up with someone who specializes in M&A, and that's usually where you're going to your best bang for your buck and get the best outcome for yourself. We've actually had it where we called the CPA to get some information from one of our clients, and he just said outright, just so you know, I'm not going to help you much with this situation. And we said, what does that mean? He's like, look, I bill this client $25,000 a year. I'm a CPA. I don't know how to sell. How am I going to backfill that kind of business for my business? So I hope they don't sell so I can keep them as a client. And we've always, we've actually had them say that. We've always thought that from time to time that would happen, and that guy actually told us that. So we were bound and determined more than ever, and he did blow up the first deal with the first buyer, but we were able to get it sold with the second buyer. But it's just a matter of, again, working with the right people at the right time, and then go back to your, the family doctor, your accountant, attorney, to any other, post-transaction issues and things like that going forward. But it is it is important to have the right team around you, and the people on the team would be, as we talked about, that M&A attorney or merger and acquisition attorney, that deal attorney, a tax accountant, and your regular CPA or your accounting CPA, so they can understand better, how you did your financials and how you report on things and things along that line. The financial advisor, he or she's going to work with you to say, okay, what do you need to live, and what they can help you show you what that gap, if any, what that is. The M&A advisor, which again, we can help advise on the value of the business in what you're seeing out in today's marketplace, from a very realistic approach, not just a pie in the sky or some theory or what public companies are selling for, but actually what's going on in the marketplace with your specific industry and companies similar size to yours around the country. How are they actually transacting, among other, and then helping you if you do decide to transition internally. We can consult on an hourly basis with your accountant and attorney to put that deal together internally, or if you go externally, which is where we spend most of our time, we're going to put together the book to tell the story. We're going to make sure that we recast all the financials. We're going to do all the research of who the different buyer groups may be from a synergistic standpoint, and then work the process to maximize value or maximize what's important to you. And then the estate planning attorney, which would work with your CPA and the financial advisor after the sale to set everything up and run your estate and your financial affairs after the sale, and managing the money so you can have your money work for you versus you working for the money. So that's a part of the team. There could be others with insurance and other items in there, but those are the key people that are part of the team.
So Scott, I'm going to interrupt to the question at this point.
Sure.
Going back to that slide about the succession planning team of professionals, how do people go about finding a qualified attorney or tax and accounting CPA, so they're not ending up relying on their fishing buddy or, the person who's handled like a couple minor collection disputes but doesn't have any experience as an attorney doing mergers and acquisitions?
Yeah, I guess maybe the simplest way is that for your members who are now with the relationship that we have with you, is that they could easily just give us a call, and we could give them a couple names of people that we've worked with successfully or vetted throughout. Whether you want to work with someone in Milwaukee, or you want to get out and work with someone in Appleton, Madison, Green Bay, we could introduce you to a couple and see if any of those make sense for you. Or you can look on different websites and see who are the people that specialize in M&A. But then I think a lot of people put it on their bio, but then you really got to find out how many deals have you truly done in the last 6 to 12 months. Can I talk with one or two of your past clients? Did they do what they say they're going to do? Did they return phone calls? Did they get things done on a timely basis, or did they blow through deadlines and things along that line? And also, what size deals do they do? If they're doing $100 million deals, they might not be the best fit for your $3 million company, or vice versa. You want to work with the right team that doesn't over lawyer, but also protects you and knows how to take care of you.
Okay, that's helpful. And actually, just for those of you who are on the line, if you have questions you want to ask Scott during the presentation, there's a questions box on your menu. If you want to type in questions, either during the presentation or afterwards, I can make sure those questions get answered. So, okay, thanks, Scott. We can.
Sounds good. All right. Next is, the business is not market ready. So again, if you're reactive versus proactive, most businesses are not ready just at a drop of a hat, to maximize the value of the company. And again, part of that is just knowing the value ahead of time, but also, getting into some of the key items within the business. And I'll pick out, a few and jump around a little bit, but lack of management team. If you are, the entire business as the owner, you're doing all the top work, you've got all the sales relationships, you're doing all the quoting, you're doing everything. You've got a couple worker bees running around. It's tough. It's tough to get a lot of value out of that business, because the owner is the value. And even if you said, hey, I want to stay on, what if something were to happen to you, or what if your attitudes change after the sale? What did they really buy? So as much as you can, and even whether you're, again, all these mistakes and concepts can be, whether you're $100,000 revenue company or $100 million company. They all pretty much work, all the concepts are the same. So understanding, building out your team, if you're a larger company, building out your management team and really putting people in place and working yourself out of the business. If you're a smaller business, getting some of the key employees to at least meet some of the people that you work with from a sales standpoint, or just having a second point of contact, or teaching someone else, how do you quote or bid, or putting that process down on, into a computer program, even if it's an Excel spreadsheet versus having that all in your head. So the more that you can get your knowledge out and coach up or train a management team or key employees, the more market ready or the more valuable your company is. Customer concentration issues. If you've got, I kind of call this, the Walmart effect in retail or consumer goods. If you've been growing your business over the years, but it's all with one customer, and that customer is 70 or 80% of your business, that makes it very tough to sell. Again, if you put your buyer hat on and look at it from a buyer standpoint, if that one customer goes away, I'm out of business, or that transaction obviously wasn't going to make a lot of sense for us. So the more you can build your business, but keeping your customer concentration low, most people put it around 20 to 25% of for your number one customer. So if your number one customer is 25% or less, you're doing pretty good. Once you get over that, doesn't mean that you're not saleable. None of these things, if you're not doing one or two of these things, doesn't mean you're not saleable. It's just these are the ideal scenarios. So that customer concentration of really, making a asserted effort to grow through new customers, attracting new customers, or reoccurring revenue. I know, in many of the trades industries, it used to be all about, a one-time sale, a one-time project, and you're out. The more you can show that you're doing repeat business with, maybe with that general or whoever else it might be, or that customer, the better off you are. And if you can get into more maintenance contracts, more reoccurring revenue, the recurring revenue substantially increases the value of your business. So if you get to where, hey, we're doing 20, 30, 40% recurring revenue, and all the other stuff is installation and new project work, that's a much more valuable company than someone doing no recurring revenue and all project-based work. So that customer base is also something that you want to take a look at. Working capital. Most companies, are heavy or lax on their working capital. And what do I mean by working capital? Most times there's some kind of a working capital. It's kind of the gas that's, makes a vehicle go down the road. So it's your kind of your current assets, excluding your cash, minus your current liabilities, or your accounts receivable, plus your inventory, minus your accounts payable and accruals and things along that line. And your business most times is going to be, the business value is going to be based on cash flow and a certain multiple of that EBITDA or adjusted cash flow. But there's going to be typically an amount of working capital that's included in the value as an asset. It's a financial asset to help the business continue on the day after the sale, with the accounts receivable coming in, and they also assume the payables going out, and it keeps things a little bit more streamlined and less intrusive for the customers and the business itself. So if you're very lax on collecting receivables, and you've got a bunch of inventory sitting there that you really don't need, but you just order because you've got the excess cash, and you've always done it that way. You just like to have it around, and then you pay your bills really quick, liabilities, whatever that net number is, that's what the buyer is going to expect in that business. And what we've seen is that if you can, collect your receivables a little bit quicker, work your inventory down a little bit, and then, allow your payables to stretch out without hurting any relationships, but just using other people's money a little bit. We've easily seen companies that are, a $5 million company put $200,000 to $500,000 in their pocket, because again, the value of the business is going to be tied to cash flow. And then if you can take that additional revenue, additional dollars out of the business, all the better. And that's really something that we see as some low-hanging fruit. And what people usually buyers look at is the last 12 months. So it's not something that you have to do forever, but it's to show efficient. The last 12, 18, the business, will put, financials in the company, or are you just doing everything internally and having your CPA do the taxes at the end of the year. Again, the more risk, the more a buyer is going to either not be interested or lower the value, and the more time we're going to spend in due diligence. And that's where most of the time is spent in diligence, is in the financial side. You know, are you recording revenue properly? Are you using accounting if you're working on large projects, or are you just billing it when you get a check? You know, they're going to want to see that and understand that. So if there's ever a price adjustment with a deal, most times it goes back to them getting in and the buyer getting in and looking at your financials and auditing them. And most times they'll try to bring them up to GAAP standards, where most of us aren't at GAAP. But you know, the more you can spend organizing your numbers, having KPIs or key performance indicators, so you really can understand your business from a couple of standpoints, or a couple of numbers, will all help in getting through that. The more, you know, if you're going to audit financials for the last, you know, 3 years would be ideal. Even the last year, it just helps the buyer understand that, okay, these are the financials, they're done by a credible firm, and it'll help move through that process a little bit quicker. Because again, as we say above there, you know, time kills all deals, and either the buyer or the seller at some point is going to have deal fatigue, and they'll just end up walking away. And then you've got to start, you know, whether you kill the deal or the buyer kills the deal, you know, you got to start from square one again. You know, you got to go all the way back to square one. So the more organized you can get, the more you've got your financials in order, better management team, growth trends, working capital, customer concentration. You know, if you work in on a couple of those points, will really help you get that deal as market ready as possible. And again, that's why we're talking about this exit planning. So when you are going to market, you'll have these things done in advance, because the great thing we all have right now is time. For most of us, you have time to do some of these things. And again, you don't need to do them all, but the more time you have, the more things you can correct, and the better chance you're going to have of success of exiting your business down the road, whatever that might be for, you know, what's most important to you. Not knowing all your exit options, you know, we've seen, you know, this be something that people are really surprised of how many options there are now. You know, I think a lot of people, you know, will talk about, I'm going to sell it to my family members or a key management team. And obviously there's pros with that, that, you know, the legacy continues on. You give people that you care about a chance to grow their net worth, and you know, you can transition out of the company that way. And there's some obviously very good cultural things with that as well. The downside for that is typically what we've seen is that the owner is taking the majority, if not all, the risk in seller financing or financing the deal, so that the new management team or family members will pay them out over a 7 to 10 year period. And if the business goes in the tank, could be something that they did, could be something that they didn't do as a new management team, or it could just be, you know, an event like the market crashing back in 8 and 9, or 9/11, or a big new competitor coming into town. You know, now that value's eroded, the owner never gets out the money that they were, you know, that they should have gotten out, and it's just not a good situation for everybody. We've seen a lot of families, you know, split up because of different things that happen in things like this. There's obviously the ESOP, which is selling to your employees. A lot of the similar pros and cons. There's some great tax benefits to that as well. You typically want to be of a certain size. You know, if you're a 10 employee firm, it's probably not going to make sense. I think it's usually in that 30 to 50 employee size or greater is where that, you know, some of that can make a lot of sense. The recapitalization is something that over the last 5 to 10 years has become much more common, where the owner says, boy, I'd love to take, you know, we're doing really well. You know, maybe I'm 55 or 60 or whatever age, and I've still got some gas in the tank. Boy, I'd love to take some chips off the table and diversify some of my risk. You know, you can sell 60, 70, 80, you know, % of your business and leave in, you know, the balance, you know, with typically a family office or a private equity group and things along that line. And now, you know, you've got some chips off the table. If the world ends tomorrow, you know, your family's set up and you've got some money in the bank. But now you've got, let's just say, you know, 25% of equity still rolled over in the new company, and you're using their capital to help grow the business, and they might have, you know, additional capital that could open up some opportunities that you couldn't open up, or investing in more equipment or whatever else it might be to get into new marketplaces. And then they sell, let's just say in 5 years, plus or minus, and then you get that second bite of the apple, and your 25% is now could be worth, in some cases as much as your 75% was, just because of the rapid growth of, the growth of the company. With private equity groups, like anything, there's some really good ones, there's some really bad ones. You really want to make sure that if you're, partnering up with someone, that you find the right partner that understands your culture and everything else, because if not, you could be heartbroken of what they might want to do to the company, or really just looking at a short-term win and not the long-term success of the company. So again, some really good players there that would look long-term, but again, some that look short-term. So again, just knowing who your partner would be, but it's a great option for someone that sees a huge opportunity in their last 5 to 10 years of their life cycle of running a business, but don't want to double down necessarily on the opportunity, because what if it doesn't go well, and now you've got a huge amount of debt, and now you're getting to the age of retirement, or when you want to get out, and the net to you at the end of the day of selling the business might not be as much as you want it to be.
So Scott, that leads to perfectly to a question we've received from the audience, which is, when should you start your succession planning or exit planning process? I mean, is it something you should start 10 years before you plan to retire, 5 years? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and there's a slide we've got in a couple of slides, but it's really, starting, you can never start too early, because, there's different ways you might look at it. It's going, okay, I might want to do an internal sale, and then that may or may not work, say that doesn't work out because the owners don't, the new management team doesn't want to put a personal guarantee on their house or whatever it might be, or they can't get the financing that they thought they could get. Then you got to look at a different strategy. So I think, starting on laying out what the strategy is of how you're going to get out, what method, like we're talking about here, of your different exit options, the sooner the better. Again, talking about, private equity groups or family offices, you hear the large returns that they get on their businesses when they sell them in 5 to 7 years, whatever it might be. And that's a lot of times because they don't buy a company until they know, kind of how they're going to get out of it, and what that plan looks like. So they do truly look at, have the end in mind before they even start. So, ideally, you'd want to start at least 3 years prior, 3 to 5 years prior. But, if you've got 10 years, the more time you have, the more things you can do to make sure that you got your house in order and things along that line.
Great. Okay. Thanks.
And then again, under that recapitalization, where we're seeing some owners going, boy, I'd love to have my management team. They're competent. I've coached them up. They could run this business without me, or they are running it without me. But I really don't want to hold a note for 7 or 10 years and get paid over time. I'd rather get paid out all or the majority of my money at close. The private equity groups are now, backing the management teams and saying, hey, bring in what equity you have. We'll give you some meaningful equity. Or, I've even seen transactions where they'll actually lend them as much, money as within reason that they want to buy into the company. And then, at a minimal interest rate, whatever matches IRS standards. And then when the company sells, they give back the initial money that they borrowed, and then all the upside is theirs. So the private equity really wants to, in most cases, their playbook per se is to back either the owner or the management team that's in place driving the business. They don't want to come in on the day-to-day level. So this is something where you can kind of have your cake and eat it too, that you can get your employees or your family to take over the business, have a meaningful stake in the company, but also have the private equity that brings the money to the table, so you're getting paid out at least the majority of your money at close. If you're going to a third party, a true third party sale and selling 100% of your company, there's really two ways. It either can be where you either want to get out right, as soon as possible, kind of a 6 month or so transition, or some people again might say, hey, now is a good time for me to get out, but I really don't have a whole lot of hobbies. I'd love to stay in the business and just focus on this one hat, wear the one hat that I love, whether it's sales or inventing things or quoting or whatever it might be. And you get a consulting employment contract, you get a salary, you get your benefits of health insurance and things like that, and stay with the company, but you've got a lot less, less stress and wearing less hats because they've taken over and are now running the business. So those are some different options out there. And then obviously just shutting it down and liquidating is an option. It's usually going to get you the least amount of money out of a sale or any kind of a transition. And then a minority sale is someone that, they want to retain. This was something that was, not used a lot in the past, but in the last probably 3 years, this has become more and more common, where you might just want to either take some chips off the table. Hey, I want to sell 30% of my company just to take some chips off the table and keep doing what I'm doing and have control of the business. Or again, you might see a growth opportunity and you're just looking for some growth capital to help get to the next level, because you either don't want to take that on, or it just needs capital to get to the next stage. So the big takeaway from this piece is that there's usually a lot, and there's more options than this. If you get into some specifics, there's a lot of different ways that you can exit your company. And if you just think it's just a third-party sale or just sell to my kids, and that's my only option, there's a lot of other options, and you should spend the time to get into the detail and really think through which ones make the most sense, for me and my family and what we're trying to accomplish. So what are the implications of an ill-prepared deal or ill-prepared company? Almost certain that you're going to leave money on the table after years of hard work. You're making decisions under duress, which are not fun, because these are decisions you get one chance to do this right. If you're making them, under stress or a family member's making them under stress, because of one of the 5 Ds that happened, it's just not a fun place to be. Like we've seen, loved ones cleaning up the mess, so they've got a double whammy. They've lost a loved one or a spouse, and they've also have a company that they're trying to figure out what they can do with it, and who to trust and who not to trust. And there's power shifts within the company of who's trying to take control and who's truly helping out the family and things along that line. If you've only got one option, or you rush into something, you could definitely have dissatisfaction, kind of seller's remorse, or like a lot of people, you just don't get a deal done at all. So let's get into the process a little bit about okay, what to that one question, what can we do moving forward? So here we talked about 3 to 5 years prior to the exit, start planning early, and then not just plan do the plan once like a strategic plan when you started the company, but review it and revise things annually. Things change. You might want to retire sooner because you're doing better. You might want to stay back. You might have a son or daughter once you get in the business that 5 years ago said, I don't want anything to do with this business. So again, it's never too early to start planning in this process. So here's the process, and it's broken down into a couple different stages. But if you think of this kind of as a 3-legged stool, if you've got a stool and you've got one leg, you're going to fall over pretty easy. 2 legs, it's still not going to be sturdy. But you put a 3rd leg on there, and it really gives you that sturdy foundation of what you need to really put your plan in place and that exit planning in place. So the first one here is determining your personal and business goals. So this really goes, and this is where that financial advisor comes in. And again, we've got a couple of financial advisors that we've vetted that we can definitely help with if you want some referrals, because again, with financial advisors, some are very good on small amounts of money, and some are very good on large amounts of money and tax implications and ways to minimize your taxes and really, some want to grow. A lot of them are just, hey, how can I get a 4 or 5% return, but protect my investment and not have it go away if there's another crash coming up. But understanding, with that financial advisor, what do I need to live the lifestyle that I want? So sitting down with your spouse or your family, what do you want out of life? This is where you can kind of step back and look at the big picture. What do we want to do for myself? What kind of lifestyle do I want to live? What do I want to do for our family? What do I want to do for the community? It really allows you to put that whole ideal structure out there. And then with your financial advisor, you sit down and say, okay, here's the assets I have, here's the debt that I have. If I want to live this ideal lifestyle, what do I need? Is there a gap? Do I have enough money now? Is the gap $1 million? Is it 10 million? And they can run different what-if scenarios and really come up with a good idea of what you would need and the risk profile associated with that to live the lifestyle as long as you need to live it and do what you need to do. So that would be step one, is understanding that personal and your business goals. Again, what do you want out of the business? The second step is working on what's the value of the company. So if you need, let's just say an easy number, $10 million net out of the business, what's the value of your company? That's again where we can help you, or other parties can help you do, what we call our estimate of value, or our business and market analysis, to say, okay, realistically, this is not a home run or pie in the sky, or let's think what Lori wants to hear. This is, here's what's really going on out there. Baseball analogy. This is kind of a single or a double from business value standpoint, or the financial value. and what is that number? And once you have that number, working with your CPA from a tax standpoint and say, okay, my company's worth, 15 million, but I've got 3 million in debt, and I'm an S corp or I'm a C corp. What's my tax liability going to be? What am I going to net out of this thing? So once you have, what you need to get out of the business to live your ideal lifestyle, what the value of your company is, and what your tax liability and your net number is going to be after all fees and things like that. Now you can say, okay, are we there? Can I take the money? Can I go to market now? And now we can do the things that we want to do in the next chapter of our life, or is there a gap? Boy, it's net of 8 and we really need 10. Well, then you either can readjust your expectations, if you're starting to feel burnt out, and say, okay, we're gonna have to get by with 8, or say, okay, the next, how can we promote, protect, and preserve the value of the business? So getting back to, again, with this business market analysis that we could do for you, understanding what are those 2 or 3 things that you could really do that would be the best bang for your buck, that you would help grow the value of that company or minimize risk, which again enhances the value of that business, and work on that. You can do it by yourself. There's different consultants that we've used that are, not part of Cornerstone, that can help expedite that, whether it's on the financial side of things, financial reporting, or if it's putting together a sales and marketing program or division, whatever else it might be, building out your management team. They can help with that and roll up the sleeves, and then decide again whether you're going to sell to the insiders or sell to a third party. And there's no right or wrong answer to that. As we talked before, there's pros and cons. With everything, you're typically going to get a lesser value selling to insiders than you will to a third party. But there's also obviously the benefits of that, of keeping it in the family or management team and things along that line. And then ensuring your overall business continuity. So once you've figured out, okay, we have what we need, we've got the net of 10, we know we're going to go, let's just say, to a third-party sale. We bring in the right M&A folks. We put together our team. You work through that process, and then you want to make sure that you've got, it's not just where you sell the business, or like your house. You sell your house and you hand over the keys. 30 days later, the process to sell a business is typically, I would say, 8 to 10 months. We've done it as quick as a month and 24 days, as long as 3 years. But I would say our average is probably about 8 months to sell a business from start to finish. And then there's that process after that. Even if you want to get out tomorrow, most buyers are going to want you to stick around for 6 months, plus or minus, if not more, to help transition those relationships and show you how you've done things and everything else. So if you kind of have to work backwards of when you want to completely be out of that business. You kind of have to work backwards a year and a half, and say, okay, I've got to go to market at this point in time. So then I want to then go backwards again, going, okay, now I want to spend 2 or 3 years kind of cleaning things up in the business before I do that. It all takes time. And then again, working the financial plan after the fact, of just working with your financial advisor and your team after the fact to run the business, or that you're out of the business and just having your money work for you and enjoying the next step in your life. And I think that's also part of it that's not in here is the whole piece around the emotional side of things. In those personal goals, you really got to look and make sure. We've had people that have said, yeah, the numbers make sense and I'm ready to sell. But then when we really get down to it, we bring in offers, they just emotionally can't let go of their business. And again, that's not right or wrong, but you really want to look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, can I pull the trigger on this? Does it make sense for myself, my family, for my business now? Because you don't want to get down the path where you spend a bunch of time and money only to find out that you just emotionally can't let go of the business.
So Scott, do you have any kind of checklist or anything that business owners can use to kind of work through, writing down those goals and figuring out what questions to ask themselves about, am I emotionally ready to handle this? We could get you some different things. We've got checklists of, what's the most important to them and ranking things in a priority order. And then, we could put together some checklists for you too of kind of the things that they would need to do and the people they need to work with and things along that line. That wouldn't be a problem. I could get you something on that. Okay. If that would help. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right, just the last couple of slides here. So bottom line, simply stated, transition planning or exit planning is just sound business strategy. It's not something that is a huge, complex thing that has to be done, years and years in the future or in the past. It's just something that it just makes sense to do this because it makes your company more valuable. It puts your company on a stronger foundation. And again, it allows you to set the stage better to control your ability to exit when you want to or when you need to, and getting the best price or getting what is most important to you at the end of the day. What's in it for you as the business owner to go through this process? The first one I think is self-awareness. Really understanding, and this might sound simple, but I challenge everybody right now, what do you really truly want out of the business? What do you want for your family, any kids or grandkids that you might have? What do you want out of, for the community? Again, why are you doing all this in the first place? What's your goal at the end of the day? And that's something to sit down with your spouse and really, or a mentor and really, bounce some ideas off of people. And again, the nice thing is it's a whiteboard. There's no right or wrong answers. It's just a matter of truly understanding what you want. And I think that goes back to, if you don't do this step and you just sell, again, that's where that seller remorse could come into play because you didn't set up an employee for success like you wanted to, or a management team, or you weren't able to get top dollars so you couldn't give to a certain charity that you're very passionate about, or whatever else it might be. Second is intentional, intentionally running a process. Business owners, if you've got a good plan and you execute on the plan, it's much easier to run that plan than it is to react to the unknown or react to a negative trigger, which again is the majority of businesses that are, or a good amount of the businesses that are looking to sell. Efficient decision making and negotiations. If you all of a sudden get an unsolicited offer, if you've got your business, quote unquote, market ready at any given time, or is much better than it would be if you took your eye off the ball, you can react to those unsolicited offers and see if those may or may not make sense at the end of the day. Better control the situation. As much as any of us can have control, again, it just allows you to make proactive decisions versus reactive. And when you're working a plan versus reacting, there's obviously going to be less stress, agility to deal with unplanned events. So again, if something were to happen to the business owner, there's a plan in place and there's a strategy of how that could happen, and the business could stay, up and running and could maintain those jobs and maintain the legacy of the owner versus the other, which would probably be the business shutting down, employees losing their job, and legacy gone. Enhancing the value and doing it faster. I think by understanding, with our business and market analysis, we're not going to give you 42 points to make your company perfect like some consultant would. We're going to tell you, here's what we're working with buyers for 20 years. Here's where they value, put the most value. Here's what they really care about. Because the worst thing is for business owners to say, boy, I've busted my butt and I've worked on these 3 things for the last year, and the buyer goes, yeah, I don't really care, or we're going to bring our own systems in anyways, or whatever else it might be. So really understanding the value drivers and the value detractors, and then working on just a couple of key areas while not taking your eye off the ball. And the transformation. Again, it's much better to be going to the next chapter in your life and understanding what that next chapter is than the unknown, and you're just running away from something. So it allows you to move in a much, have a much better attitude and much more confidence moving to the next chapter in life versus away from it. So what are the next steps? We talked about a lot of these, but understanding your goals and values, putting those down on paper, not just thinking about them, but talking with people, putting them down on paper, understanding what they are, meeting with your financial advisor, understanding what do you truly need to get out of your business to achieve the lifestyle that you want. Assessing the current status of your business. What are the strengths? What are the opportunities? Where's the low-hanging fruit that maybe you've ignored for a little bit, that now you've been running in this, on this treadmill or on this marathon, and now you see this finish line. We help you set the finish line, and knowing where it is, and you can kind of take one big deep breath and sprint to that finish line, knowing that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Knowing what that value is, understanding your financial position. If there is, again, if there is an area where the gap is not there, or there is a gap, then understanding and building up that business, removing the risk in the goals. And we got the huddles here, but really getting together with your team, building up that team, early, and maybe getting a mentor that has gone through this process before and actually sold a business. You got to make sure in this process you're listening to the right people and not people who don't have the experience or have a a financial goal that tell you something differently or whatever else it might be, and then annually look at it, because like I said, things change, positive, negative, but if you look at this annually and take a step back, take a day or two, get away from the office or the shop and just say, okay, have my goals changed? Is anything different? What have we been able to set aside for the financial advisor? If in the last year, does that do anything different to when we might be able to get out of the business and things along that line? So that's really what I wanted to get across. I know it's a lot of things that to try to put together in a short period of time. I'd be open, obviously I'm open to questions now, or we have a relationship now with Lori and your group that you guys have access to us. And Lori, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that as well, if there's not any other questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Scott said, the association has formed a relationship with Cornerstone because we believe the process of succession and exit planning is so important for every business. So we have negotiated a discount with Scott's business, Cornerstone Business Services, on the business and market analysis that Scott was talking about earlier. That typically runs about $3,500. Scott has graciously discounted the fee for association members to $1,500. And because the association believes so strongly in this process, we're willing to chip in the first $750 toward that analysis. So if you are interested in taking advantage of that, you can get a $3,500 value analysis from Scott's group for the low cost of $750. So I'm making that deal available to the first 3 businesses that want to take advantage of it. So if you are interested, please feel free and give me a call at 414-543-7622, extension 253, or you can email me, Lori, that's Lauri, at pmsmca.com. And at this point, I'll just throw it open to the audience for questions. Again, you can use either the question or the chat feature on your screen there if you want to quickly email me a question, or if you want me to unmute your line so that you can ask Scott a question directly using your own voice, I'm happy to do that too. So let me just give you a couple seconds to throw out some questions.
Yeah, and Lori, while you're waiting, see if anybody sends anything in. Again, what you're going to get with that business and market analysis is an estimate of value to understand, what your value is worth in today's marketplace. You're going to get you an industry report to show, kind of what the future looks like over the next, 3 to 5 years for the industry. You're going to get, we're going to benchmark your financials against your financial peers, so you can understand what that looks like. They can take a survey on. We can send them a link to a survey that will get them a 28-page report that breaks their company down in 8 different categories of and how they compare to their industry and how they compare overall from a salability standpoint. And we're also going to look at all those items and put together kind of our analysis of what are the top 2, 1, 2, 3 things that they could do to help take their company to the next level. Or and with that too, we have a couple of question Q&A that go back and forth. So if they have other questions about exit options or strategies and things like that, that's all part of that process. It usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks once we get the information, but it's not too time intensive for the business owner, but it does give them a good baseline to start the conversations with their financial advisor and with their CPA and things like that, just to understand where they sit, because it could be worth more or it might not be worth as much as what you think. And we've seen many people think they need 5 or 10 million just because they're round numbers when they really need 7 or 3. So this will just, again, the more we can help you, give you good real-time information so you can make well-informed decisions on how, when, why to exit your business, the more successful everybody's going to be. And that's what we're here to try to provide you in the association.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that overview. And as Scott said, it's quite a comprehensive report, quite a bit of very valuable information in there. So I'd really encourage anyone who's listening to take advantage of that. We have been recording this webinar, and we're going to make it available on our website so that you can listen to it again, because Scott did cover quite a bit of information. So you can feel free to listen again anytime on demand and, you know, share it with others within your business or in other businesses who you know might benefit from this webinar. And with that, I don't think we have any additional questions from the audience. So I want to thank Scott again for taking the time to put together this presentation. It's been very informative. So thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
And I want to thank everyone who's been listening. So if you have more questions or want to listen again, feel free to visit our website at any time. It's www.pmsmca.com. Thanks again. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.